Hi all, welcome back. And then now we have some amazing talk coming around security. And then it's Adrian Luna he's a head of strategic partnership at WebScale. And three things he loves the most is coffee, cloud, and commerce. Uh, and I also have the similar choice like coffee, commerce, and currency. Uh, he's looking at that as it is a surge in the e-commerce demand into the market. Bad guys will have more opportunity to break them, and security will be one of the biggest challenge coming in 2021. So he will be sharing his insights on how we can be secure, safe, and grow faster. Adrian, thanks for being with us. Over to you.
No, I appreciate the introduction. Thanks. Yeah, coffee absolutely has been first today. So just to give everybody context, it's 11:30 p.m. my time. I've been up since about 6 o'clock this morning. So it's been a long day so far. So I hope I can be entertaining and keep everyone awake as well as myself. But thanks for the introduction. I appreciate it. I appreciate everyone joining. It really is a pleasure to be in front of all you all virtually. As mentioned, my name is Adrian Luna. I'm the current head of global partnerships here at WebScale, and welcome to the world, the war on e-commerce, right? I mean, considering everything that happened in 2020 and its overall impact on the online world, 2021 is already shaping up to be a monumental security challenge for merchants so far. I mean, it's just from what we've seen. And walking through a brief agenda really quick, just so everybody knows what we'll go into. So, not to continue to harp, I've sat in a couple of other sessions. I know, the pandemic and COVID-19 in 2020 has been at the forefront of a lot of these things. So, it's just necessary, right? We want to start with a look back on a year of what we saw as far as unprecedented growth and change. And then we'll jump into some recommendations for enterprise grade security. And when I say enterprise grade, right, it's nothing to freak out about. It really is just, I mean, a sophisticated means of defending a merchant storefront, right? I mean, in all reality, security techniques that at one time were considered best practices or at one time were considered luxuries. Nowadays, these are more of minimum requirements, and I'll deep dive into that a little bit later in the discussion. But what it really boils down to is just, protecting an online merchant, and more importantly, protecting customer, sensitive data. Any breach to a storefront, any skimming of sensitive data, card data, whatever it is, can have a huge impact, a negative impact on a storefront's brand. So, we'll talk through that a bit. Next, I'll also spend the bulk of our time walking through a threat mitigation example and a step-by-step view of an actual attack in progress. So hopefully give a little bit of a look and feel to what we always talk about as a mage card attack, or some sort of infiltration on your online storefront's defenses. And then at the end of this, I'm super excited about this part. So I'll wrap things up with a sneak peek into our global e-commerce security report. So this is a report that's actually set to launch later this month and in much greater detail, but we are excited to share a few snippets with you all here today. So stay tuned close to the end. We have a couple of slides to show you on that part. Before we get into e-commerce, we talked about taking a step back and looking back to 2020. I mean, the fact that we're here at this Meet Magento event virtually as opposed to in person, I mean, this is really a testament to what happened in everyday life, right? And there's no revelation there. We all feel it. We all see it. We've all felt its effects. But when you focus in and dive in on the pandemic's and impact on e-commerce, I think that's where you start to see, and the graphic here shows you, right? You see this tremendous uptick in online sales. And it was an uptick that was over a very short period of time, right? So just to put things in perspective, we saw about 10 years worth of growth happen in the first 8-week period of when COVID-19 took shape. And for several different reasons, right? And if we just look at some of the markets that saw incredible amounts of growth, we're talking anything from online food services to health products to exercise equipment, athletic and leisure wear, athleisure wear, I think it's called. You name it, right? There's just a ton of these markets that we're seeing a tremendous amount of growth. And we all know that digital commerce was already trending in this direction. It was already getting there, right? And the pandemic just acted as a rapid accelerant that just got us to where we are today. So I think, the most telling part of this massive shift to online spending is, even though restrictions are being lifted in some parts of the world and we're slowly returning to some sort of normality, buying habits they remain in the favor of online commerce. Buying habits have forever been changed. And there's no sign that people are going to revert back to old purchasing habits. I mean, I know I haven't, right? I mean, without even realizing it myself, I'm now making purchases from new retailers online. And I know because I'm getting all sorts of, new sales campaigns in my email inbox. So, it is a tremendous disruption. And with that disruption, brings opportunity, it brings threat. It just brings an overall look and feel to online shopping. So if we dig into more specifics, right, aside from growth industries that I talked about, we also saw a rapid change in functional needs and capabilities of an online storefront. So, having an online presence, it's no longer an option. It's no longer a nice to have or a luxury, right? I mean, the way that customers interact with your brand online is more crucial now than ever. So, last year, for example, things like curbside pickup functionality, things like buy online, pick up in store demand. I mean, the demand for these types of functionalities and fulfillment methods just went through the roof. And again, at one point they were luxuries, and suddenly they just became necessary to stay in business, to continue contact with your end users, to be able to drive revenue through your business. And this is where Magento as an application shines, because Magento has the ability to be molded into whatever it is that you need it to be with the help of the right developer. So the application itself was able to accommodate a lot of these changes were able to be made. And it's a great thing, right? It's beautiful that we can be this agile in online commerce, where you don't have to necessarily rip and replace. You can add different features and functionalities. But separate from e-commerce functionality, last year we also saw massive amounts of people from around the world start to work from home, and we've seen that trend just continue, right? A lot of these companies just maintain the work from home policies. So this might not seem like a big deal, but if you think about it, right? I mean, the people working from home are also the merchants, IT personnel, administrators, anybody accessing the store's back end to make normal changes for everyday business, things that they would typically do from a centralized office location. Now they're doing it from all of these remote locations. So with remote access brings even more complexity into this equation. And with that complexity, unfortunately, comes vulnerability, right? So I know I spent the first part of the discussion talking about, the rise in customer demand and online brand experience and critical functionality needs and, things like that, right? But really, it's all in an effort to set the stage for the headline of the talk, right? The war on e-commerce. So, here's really where we start to talk about the bad guys. So, this massive influx in online traffic and spending has just meant an even bigger opportunity for malicious attacks. The bad guys are really they're licking their chops. They know that new merchants are coming online every single day, and more transactions are being processed every single day. So we're now seeing, I mean, it's crazy. We're seeing packaged software attack kits for as low as just a few $1,000s. I mean, they're commoditizing these attack kits, and at a high level, right? I mean, everybody I'm sure is aware of mage cart attacks, right? Basically targeted at Magento's shopping cart system, and are put out there in an attempt to skim or steal, payment card info, right? All of these transactions going on online, and if these mage cart attacks are successful, I mean, they can be a huge hit to a brand's reputation among their customers, among prospects. Makes it very difficult to continue to do business or maintain brand loyalty. And I think overall, the stat that sticks out here has been, there has been a 34% increase in all types of e-commerce attacks across the board. So with what I just talked about, when you pair a rise of transactions and a rise of transactions completed online, an influx in traffic moving from brick and mortar purchasing now to online commerce. And then you also couple that with the decrease in the cost for these malicious mage cart software. You get a dangerous mix of bad actors attempting to infiltrate online storefronts, right? And that's where, when we talk about this war on e-commerce and these new entrants to online commerce, it's affected all of the ranks, right? Whether it's a new entrant to e-commerce, somebody that's brand new, launching a new online storefront, or anybody who is just looking to add some new features and functionality, but even to those who have been running business online for a significant period of time, but now has certain personnel working from home in a remote capacity. Everyone has really been affected across the board. So, we can keep hammering that point home, but I think at this point, right, you get the point. There's bad guys out there. They're looking to infiltrate a merchant's back end. So now the question is, right, what do we do? Well, I mean, the first thing is we've found it necessary to remove the application from the internet altogether, right? You might ask, well, how do you remove an application from the internet and still keep it online? Well, by implementing a proxy, right? So a proxy layer is a go-between between the public internet, the browser, the devices that are hitting it, and then the production environment where the store is hosted. You want to keep those things decoupled as much as possible. And at the same time, by doing this, by implementing this proxy, this barrier between production and browser, now you can start to implement automation. You can start to implement control. You can start to provide visibility into the traffic, both going in and out. So you can't necessarily mitigate risk of something you can't see, right? You can't implement automation around something if if the nature of the security is actually being hosted in the same environment that production is hosted on, right? So again, it's important to create that proxy, that barrier in between. So it's nothing more than an intelligent shield to just mitigate security risk out closer to the edge and not directly in the same environment that's being used to run the Magento storefront. It's the best way to sum it up. The next thing you need to do is require multi-factor authentication, or FMA or MFA. For all of the infrastructure access. So remember, I mentioned the influx of people now working from home. Well, again, we have admins working from home using various networks, different parts of the world. They're accessing the backend of Magento to make changes. I mean, typical work functions, but again, doing these things from remote locations. So, you can't necessarily protect the integrity of the network that they're on, or some of the practices that they have on home computers and home networks and things like that. So multi-factor authentication steps up your security to another level. Because I mean, really and truly, whitelisting admin IPs, it's not completely adequate anymore, right? So MFA is really the way to go. And finally, I think it's necessary to implement advanced firewall features. So this is a point that I can't stress enough. It's a WAF, a web application firewall. It's not really anything new, right? So setting up a WAF or a web application firewall and letting it sit there without any constant upkeep, without automation, without monitoring, setting that up without those things is practically useless. It's a digital paperweight, right? I mean, security and the monitoring of security is a full-time responsibility. And you have to have the tools to automate the monitoring of data ingress and egress. So basically traffic, again, coming in and out of your store, constantly monitoring what's going on, constantly fine-tuning things, and constantly searching and being able to identify some of these malicious IPs that are out attacking other storefronts, and you being able to cover yourself before those attacks come to you. Okay, so what happens when the bad guys do get in, right? It happens, so first and foremost, securing a point-in-time recovery measure for the application itself. So for Magento, right? Always have the ability to revert an application back to a state and point before the vulnerability occurred. Again, at one point were considered luxuries and nice to haves, but that is absolutely necessary. You have to secure a point-in-time recovery measure for Magento. You also want to establish content security policy, or CSP. and again, right, put automation. We use the term automation a lot. I mean, there's so much that goes into the nature of human error, right? I mean, there's managed services, and if managed services are primarily human driven, well, then you're focusing on people working in multiple shifts to manually monitor something, right? So we talk about automation a bunch. So you want to put automation in place for things like, you know, the quarantining of infections and the ability to be able to self-heal an application whenever a breach is discovered. You want to automate alerting for all system modifications. So everybody that needs to be notified whenever file integrity is compromised, all of those people are receiving alerts. And then when that file integrity is compromised, then that's when the healing process should actually begin. And again, alerts should immediately sound, fire alarms go off, everybody knows what's going on. And it begins to kick a process in motion that starts to take place that really takes the shape of what an automated security policy built into that proxy layer that shields browser from back in, all of that working in one, you know, beautiful orchestration of what is security and availability. All right, this is the fun part. So all this stuff that I babble on about for 20 minutes now, you know, we talk through what it is. You hear a lot of people talk about different types of attacks and how dangerous they can be to a storefront. But I think it's important to walk through an example of what automated threat mitigation is, right? So in this example, an attack is launched against a storefront. A bad guy gains access to the Magento production environment, and this could happen through different measures. I mean, I think most recently we've had you know, issues or instances where, you know, a seemingly harmless development environment is left vulnerable and actually has a direct link to production environment to then kind of sneak in the back end, you know, run through that and be able to make changes to the production environment, right? I mean, it's a bad practice in general, but again, things like that actually do happen. So again, in this example, the attack is launched. So we're going to say, you know, the bad guy now has access to the Magento production environment. Once they have that access to the application, then they begin to modify the code and actually change the way that credit cards are processed. So this is usually the beginning process of skimming. They start to manipulate code and change the routing of things and be able to gain access to this, right? So first off, the merchant should be monitoring the file system for any code changes in near real time, as soon as possible. File integrity monitoring is absolutely crucial for round-the-clock checks and balances. It's again, not a luxury, it's necessary, right? And with file integrity monitoring in place, this would then trigger an alert that something's up. There's unauthorized changes being made. There's abnormal movement within the file system. And through detection and automation, the infected server should actually automatically be identified. Okay. Once this is identified, after identification, the first action is to block access. We do not want this infected server to be able to further modify any more code. So stop it in its tracks. Don't grant it the ability to write access, grant it read access only. And basically what we're doing is, again, we're stopping these changes from being made into the file system itself. At this point, again, automation, right? It's best to automatically quarantine the infected server and fail it out of the cluster. So typically these servers are built in clusters, right? And then if there's scaling capabilities, these clusters will scale out and scale in. But what we want to do is we want to not just detect, but then automatically quarantine whatever server was infected, fail it out of the server, and then replace it with a healthy server, right? And this might seem incredibly complicated because it is, right? I mean, there's a lot going on here. There's a lot that has to happen after the vulnerability is discovered. But this is precisely why this entire process should be run by a cluster management system to minimize human intervention and the likelihood of any type of human error. And the same cluster management system, you know, doesn't just kick off this self-healing, right? This workflow of repair, but it kicks off a SecOps alert, and an incident report is created, and it lets everyone know what happened. It lets everyone know how it was resolved. And again, right? I mean, I think the analogy that I use, that I've always used, is like having a passive home alarm system, right? Something happens, intruder comes in, an alarm goes off, and there's nobody there to do anything. There's nothing that takes place to stop anything in progress, right? Great to get alerted, but what did it really do, right? So, I really hope that this high level walkthrough, helped understand a little bit more on what, a sophisticated threat mitigation technique is, and how automation helps, and how the self-healing, the repair, and just the overall getting back to a healthy environment takes place through some of these automation policies that we can put in place. So again, I hope it helped, and at this point, I think we'll jump into a sneak peek of the global security report. So the global security report, this is again, we're extremely proud of it, right? The global e-commerce security report. It's an annual review of the trends, of technologies, business impact of security, just the overall e-commerce industry. So a lot of the assessments and opinions are based off of observations that we've had managing thousands of online storefronts in the public cloud. But also we take into account a lot of input shared by customers, by partners, developers, prospects from all over the world, right? So it's a survey that we launched in December. The respondents, for the most part, were at the VP or the executive level on up, and the online traffic covered a variety of different sectors. So anywhere from storefronts that received 50,000 visitors per month, and on up to those receiving well over 1 million. So I think we got a really great variety of market segment. We got a really good look at not just certain markets under the e-commerce umbrella, or certain sizes of storefronts. I think it really spanned, it ran the gamut, to be honest with you. So since the holiday season, obviously it's a prominent part of e-commerce business. We did ask a few questions on security concerns during the holiday season. So one of the big takeaways from all of this is really all the forms of attacks are on the rise compared to the year prior to last year, right? So as compared to 2019, every single form of attack is on the rise. It really goes back to what we just talked about for the past 15 minutes. So, everything from bot attacks to DDoS, denial of service attacks, anything to make any attempt to inject into backend database and instances, things like that, right? Everything is up significantly. And again, right, we talk about mage card attacks. Mage card attacks jump out significantly here. Again, these are the attacks that are coming from groups who target, online shopping cart systems. So, again, targeting the Magento shopping cart system, looking to steal payment card information. And in the Magento ecosystem, right there, there was a lot of movement last year. There was some disruption, that the pandemic caused, but aside from that, there's also M1 going end of life. There were a lot of storefronts that were left vulnerable. There were those that did move to M2, but had less than ideal security measures, just across the board, right? Just a ton of movement. And again, like with the rise of all these attacks, the beauty of it is we have seen a renewed focus from the merchants that we talked to, right? Or that we surveyed. So a lot of them have identified that there is a need, and they are securing themselves from the bad guys, right? So I'm not going to sit here and go through each one of these statistics, but the numbers for the most part are quite self-explanatory, but I do want to highlight one thing on here. So 72% of the people said that the number one challenge around hosting is security, right? And that's because not all security products are alike. It goes back to that web application firewall I talked about, sitting there with no management, no manipulation, and no monitoring. It's kind of a digital paperweight. So, and some of the same people that said they have already invested in a firewall, in a WAF, also say that security is still a challenge, right? And again, it's the web application firewall is only as good as the people who are managing it for you. So, if anybody's boasting that they include a web application firewall, but don't, do nothing to create any sort of custom rule sets or, anything to protect your specific store and your specific application, it's a bit all for naught. And I would say, if you take nothing else away from this, just remember that, you don't want to wait until a storefront has been a victim of any of these attacks. That's not the time to deploy a fully managed security system, right? It's, I'm talking a solution developed by a specialist e-commerce with an e-commerce focus, more specifically focus on the application like Magento itself, which is its own beast, its own animal. 1,000 developers here that'll tell you the same thing. And just at the end of the day, right, the hit to a brand is just too devastating. It isn't worth it. So, kind of going through some of these takeaways as I close it up. Take a proactive approach to defining what a broad security framework looks like. Invest in it, follow it, make sure this isn't one of those check boxes that gets left to the end. Revenue is king. Driving revenue through storefronts and the growth of online business is amazing, but absolutely you want to define that security framework and make sure you follow it to a T, and monitor everything. Implement as much automation, as much logging and control as you possibly can. And the last one is close to my heart, right? Being the head of global partnerships here. I mean, partner wisely. There's others that have had experience, that have experience. I think there was over 1,400 attendees, if I remember from the opening statement here from Brent. There's a ton of people here that you can benefit from the experience of building, running, managing Magento storefronts over the years. And again, best practices is just to stay in touch with the network around you. So.
Thanks, Adrian. It has been a grateful talk, and I think we are not having any room for Q&A, but it has been insightful talk, how people should choose things wisely and how to choose a right partner like WebScale. Thank you for being with us.
I appreciate you.